Hey everyone, here's a video showing a few examples of how some of the great jazz drummers would use paradiddles in their solos. And a paradiddle, for anyone who doesn't know, is one of the standard drum rudiments. It's right, left, 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 left. I guess the most basic combination of single strokes and double strokes. It's something all of us drummers practice on a practice pad. It's a great exercise. But here are some ways that some of these great drummers used a paradiddle in a very musical way. So I'll start with the great Joe Jones, and I saw him do this in a video with Milt Buckner. And it's just a paradiddle on the snare drum, and he's accenting the first note of each paradiddle, his right hand on the ride cymbal and his left hand on the hi-hat. So he's playing. Actually, I think he even plays it matched grip, as I recall. So you have to hear him do it just to hear the great feel that he gets. It doesn't sound at all like an exercise. It's a really great grooving pattern. And you could play the same thing with single strokes. You could play. And that's cool too. It's just a different, there's a slight difference in sound. When you have those double strokes in there, it's always going to sound a little bit different. You can really hear the melodies that the tones of the sticks produce. And when you have those double strokes, it's never going to sound exactly the same as a single stroke. And when you're moving the accents around to both hands instead of having them all on one hand, it's always going to sound just a little bit different. But it feels very different. I've talked about this before with different stickings, but the difference in feeling of how it feels playing that with single strokes versus paradiddles is huge. So either way can be great, but what Joe Jones played there, I think that this is what he needed to do to get the exact sound and effect that he wanted. So now I'll move on to Gene Krupa, and one of the ways he used paradiddles that I always liked, he had an arrangement with his trio of Stompin' at the Savoy in the 1940s. And Gene would always play a great solo on there, and it was always different, but he kind of had a form to it where the first section would be these triplet buzz rolls on the snare drum, like. And then he would have a middle section on the hi-hat, and then for the end he would come back to the snare drum, but not playing the rolls and just playing around the drums a little more. But the middle section on the hi-hat, he would often play paradiddles, and he would open and close the hi-hat, so he would get effects like. And again, when you just hear the loping quality that that produces, and again, just the tone of the sticks, Gene Krupa played a lot of single strokes, and he would play things like this sometimes with single strokes as well, but it's just a different sound and a different feel. When you hear him do this, you'll hear, oh, to get that exact effect, it needed to be paradiddles. And then he'll combine that with sort of playing swing time on the hi-hat. So do things like that. And then another way that Gene Krupa used paradiddles that definitely could not be single strokes was breaking them up between the ride cymbal and the snare drum. And this is something I've heard him do and seen him do in a video on Caravan with his band, his small group. And he's playing his right hand on the ride cymbal, left hand on the snare drum, snares off, just playing a paradiddle. So it's such a cool, wild-sounding beat. And again, when you hear him play it, it doesn't at all sound like an exercise. I don't know how he decided to do that, but none of these players, it doesn't sound like they're saying, oh, let me just take a paradiddle and play it somehow. When you hear Gene Krupa play that, it just sounds like this cool beat. And then he moves the right hand from the cymbal to the snare drum and back, still playing paradiddles. So that's just another great way that Gene Krupa played a paradiddle. And then finally, I'll go to Cozy Cole. And Cozy Cole was a great rudimental drummer. He had great hands, and he had a feature called Paradiddle with with Cab Calloway. And so of course he plays a lot of paradiddles on that. And Cozy Cole, as I've talked about, he could really just stick with one pattern and kind of keep it unchanging for a while and just kind of groove out on it and get this kind of hypnotic effect. So he'll play these breaks on there where he just plays paradiddles on the snare drum, and he just plays. He just kind of grooves out on that for a while. But it just sounds so nice, and again, just these little subtle shadings and accents that he gets in there. He does the same thing on other drums. And then what he does, he starts putting in different bass drum accents under the paradiddles. And that's just a great independence exercise to play paradiddles and put these different bass drum accents in. And Cozy Cole was really an influential drummer in terms of independence. He was really, I think, one of the players who was ahead of his time with that. So it makes sense. I wouldn't be surprised if these were exercises that he was working on, that he came up with, that then he played in this solo. But still, it sounds great. He plays those paradiddles on the snare drum, then he puts these different bass drum accents in. And then he has a section on the hi-hat. So the way Gene Krupa played paradiddles on the hi-hat, Cozy Cole's doing that too. He's not really opening and closing it so much, but he puts the bass drum accents in under that. So he's playing. And then he ends up back on the snare drum, kind of similar to what Joe Jones was doing from the first example, paradiddles on the snare drum and accenting the first note of each paradiddle. And Cozy Cole puts that around the cymbals and the drums. So he's getting things kind of like. It's pretty cool. So there you go, just a few ways that these great drummers use paradiddles in their solos. I find it very inspiring, and it just shows you that these things, they don't have to just be exercises. There are ways to really play them in musical ways, or even just practice them in maybe a more musical way than just how we might normally do it. So hope that was fun for everybody. I will be back with more soon. Thanks.